Okay, in this video we're going to make some basic Python programs. So basically what we're going to try to do for our workflow is on your local machine, that's where you're going to be doing most of your development. Once you get the program running and working, then we'll move it over to the CS server with an FTP client. Okay, so to start out with, we'll open a terminal, start in my home directory, and I'm just going to change directories to my desktop. In this case, you want to have a folder for all of your work in this course. So you might put a folder on the desktop or wherever you like to organize your stuff, but change directories to that particular folder. But for me, I'm just going to do it on the desktop so you can see the files appear as I go. And I need to make, first I'll open Atom, which is my text editor, and I'm going to make a new file. And this is going to be called user, and we'll call it standard input. So standardin.py. .py is the extension for a Python program. And if you've read the Atom editor configuration, installation and configuration guide, you see we have the icon there for a Python file because we configured Atom. Alright, so Python files are just text files. Okay, so we're going to learn the most common and most useful function that exists in Python, and that is the print command. Print is the name of the function. Okay, we have the function name and then left and right parentheses. This is what's called a function call. Functions you can think of as verbs. Okay, so we're learning a programming language. There are nouns. Nouns are data. Different types of data. That could be numeric data, or that can be string data. It can be names of things, right? And then actions. Actions are telling the computer to do something with that data. Okay, so functions are actions. All right, we're telling the computer to do something by calling a function. So to call a function, we use the function name and then left and right parentheses. Okay, that's a function call, and a function can be called with no arguments. Okay, in the middle of the parentheses is where you would put argument data, and that's just additional data that you would supply to the function. Alright, so let's just try this out by itself. Standard in, and we're calling the print statement with no arguments. So to run this program, we use the Linux command python3 and then the name of the file that we want to run. So this one's called standard in. Now we see there is a new line here. Right? It's an empty space. We can prove that by commenting this out. In Atom, if you hit Control/, that automatically comments out the code. And so now when Python runs this file, there are no lines for it to read. So it's going to read the file and do nothing. So if we run the same command, python3, then the name of our file, we see there's not a new line. Okay, so that tells us that the print command automatically prints out a new line, even if you don't supply it any arguments. Okay, so we can supply it some arguments. If we want to print something to the terminal screen, if it's text, we need to use quotation marks. Okay, that's gonna specify string data. That's the type of data. So print hello, and then I can print a name. Now notice we're going to have two arguments here. We have hello, that's string data, but I can also print out numeric data. I can say 555. Alright, so this is one argument, string data, and then the second argument is numeric data. And print is able to handle any type of data you give it there as an argument. Okay, so python3, standard in, hello, and we see the print command automatically adds a space between the arguments that it prints out. Okay, so it's not printing this space here because I can remove this space and save it and run it, and we still have a space. Okay, so by default, Python automatically adds a space when you provide it arguments, and those arguments are separated by commas. So between each argument, it adds a space for you. Okay, so I can say, I could add a bunch of white space here, but that doesn't mean anything to Python. When I save it, run the code, and see there's just the one space. And that's because each argument is separated by commas. So this is similar to a Linux command where you would have the command name and then everything that follows is an argument, except instead of a space separating the arguments in Python, you have a comma separating each of your arguments. So this is the basic syntax for a function call. Okay, so this is a function call. So we've got that. It's printing hello. Now, let's say we want to get some user information from the command line. So when they run the function, or when they run the program, Python3 stdin.py, we want to ask the user for more information. Okay, so we can use another function called input, and this is how we get standard input. Okay, so standard input takes an argument, and the argument displays a message to ask the user for some information. Okay, you don't have to provide an argument here, but most of the time you're going to want to. Okay, we're going to say, what is your name? Okay, now I'm going to add a space here. This white space is important. Alright, so what is your name? When I run this program, see, it displays what is your name and then also that space. Now as I type my name, we see that that space helps us differentiate between the message from standard from the input function. That was the first argument. So everything we typed in here gets displayed, and then we type something, and as soon as we press enter, the rest of the program runs. So basically, in Python, the code runs one line at a time, and until that line is finished, it won't move on to the next one. So we're on this input line, and it does not go any further until you have typed in some input and pressed enter. As soon as you press enter, this function call is completed, and then Python moves on to the next code. Alright, so how do we get this data that we typed in here? We want the user to be able to type in anything here, and we want to be able to get it inside of our program and do something with it. Okay, so this requires the idea of variables. Alright, so I'm going to make a variable name, and I'm going to call that variable name name. Okay, there are rules on what you can and cannot name variables, but it's not any different than basic algebra where you have a variable name and it represents some unknown value. In this case, we don't know what the user is going to type in. Okay, so we store that in a variable, and it can be anything. And then in our print function, variables basically take the data that they typed in on the command line and store it in memory somewhere, and you can reference that data in memory by referencing this variable name. Okay, and so I can say in my print command, instead of providing string data, I can provide the variable, and Python will look at that variable and it will look up in memory what's stored in that variable. It will retrieve that data that was stored there and then place it here, and then the print function will be called with the argument hello and then whatever value was in here. Okay, so let's try this now. We run Python3 space stdin.py. What is your name? Luke. Hello, Luke. And we might want to change this a little bit. Hello, comma, Luke. So there's the name. Now look, I want to put an exclamation point here. Now see what happens here. We have a comma, so Python's going to add an extra space, and that's not what we want. What's your name? Luke. Okay, so we need to figure out a way to get rid of that space. Okay. So in Python, there's a concept of expressions. You can take a series of data variables. So this is a variable that contains a string, and this is an operator. So this is the concatenation operator. I'm joining two strings together. I'm concatenating them. So Python looks up for the variable name called name, and it looks in memory. It locates the data saved in that memory location, places it here, And then we have an addition operator, okay, which for strings is concatenation. So we have one string over here, and then we're concatenating that with this string, which is just a single exclamation point. All right? The entirety of this expression gets evaluated before the print function gets called. So any arguments that you provide to a function, if it's an expression, that entire expression gets evaluated before the function itself is called. So all of the values as arguments have to turn into actual values before you can call the print function. So Python does that automatically. Okay, so you have a string here, and then it sees, well, wait a minute, this is not just one string, this is an expression, so I have to evaluate the expression, and then it returns a certain value here in place of this. And then print is called with this string value and then the result of this expression, which is going to be a string value. Okay, so it's important to understand with a function, any arguments you supply that are expressions, those expressions evaluate to a value before the function is actually called. Alright, so let's look at this. This should say hello. Python inserts a space in between the arguments with the print function. And then we have my name, or whatever the user types here. I'll type something different this time. And then we're adding an exclamation point to that. So that is string concatenation. Okay, so that's the basics of the print function. Okay, now white space can be important. If I add a space here at the end of this string, that is part of this string, and then Python's going to add another space. So if we do it this way, we'll have two spaces. What is your name? Bob, and we see we have two spaces this time. Okay, so attention to detail is very important in computer science. Alright, so now basically we can get information from the command line, and we can do this multiple times. We can say, what is your name? And then say hello. And then we can say input, what is your favorite color? And again, we want to put a little space here, right? So that way when the user types something, it's not just run together. I'll show you what it looks like without the space, so you see. So without the space here, it's going to just run together. What's your name? Bob. Hello, Bob. What is your favorite color? Red. Now notice, see, there's no space there, so it all kind of runs together. So if you want it to look pretty, you need to add a little space, and I recommend you try to do that. It makes everything easier to read. Okay, so we've got this input function, and we typed in red, but we're not saving that anywhere. Up here we had the input function, and when that was called, the result of this function gets evaluated to whatever they type in. Okay, so after input gets called, this becomes the string red, and then we're storing red in a variable. So I can store anything in any type of data in a variable. So I can have a greeting, and I can say that the greeting is hello. So what this is doing is, this is my variable name. So notice it's not colorized, it's just white. Okay, and then that's what's called an identifier. It's a variable identifier. And then we have the string hello. So this is the data, and it's being stored in this variable name. Okay, so down here I can use, instead of typing hello here, I can just say print out the greeting, then the name, and then an exclamation point. Okay, so similarly here, this function call input is retrieving whatever the user types on the command line and then storing it in this variable called name. Alright, so we need to do the same thing down here. So we need to store a variable, so we can call it fav_color. So there's lots of different ways to name variables. In Python it's common to, if you have a variable that name that is multiple words, you separate that with an underscore. Okay, you cannot have a variable name that is two words. Okay, so you can't have spaces in your variable names. So it's common to use underscores. Another common way of doing it is just capitalizing each word. Okay, but Python style tends to be underscores. Okay, but every coding language is different, and you don't always have to follow. Those are just kind of guidelines, and there's debate on the internet about the best way of doing some of that stuff. So you can figure some of that out for yourself. But just know that you cannot have spaces in your identifiers, and your identifiers can't start with a number. Okay, they can have numbers in them. I could say favorite color 2. Right, but it can't start with a number, otherwise that's an error. Python thinks that's going to be a number value instead of a variable identifier. Okay, so that's a lot for variable, just a variable name. Alright, so we've got favorite color. What is your favorite color? And now we've got that stored in a variable, and we can say print name plus. Now we're using double quotes here and then an apostrophe S. So this should say Bob's or Luke's or whatever the user types. And then we can say Bob's space favorite color is. And we add a space, and we can just add concatenate fav color. Right? And then add an exclamation point. Okay, so we have a string. This whole thing is a string. This is storing a string, and then we're adding a string. So we're adding 4 strings together. We're concatenating 4 strings. All right. So let's run this. Favorite color green. And there you go. So this is basic input-output with string data. Alright, let's try something with numeric data. Alright, so I need to collect data from the terminal screen here. All of the data we're getting back is string data, whatever I type. Even if I typed in the number 5 here, what is my name? Say my name was 555. Okay, it's saying that is character data. Alright, so 555, when it's stored in this variable, it's stored as character data, not numeric data. Alright, so here I hit Control C, and that ends my program. So let's say I run my program and I don't want to type anything in here, I just want to exit the program. Control C causes it's an interrupt. It causes the program to exit, to just quit. Alright, keyboard interrupt. Alright, so anytime you run the program and you decide you just don't want it to run anymore, hit Control C from the terminal, and that will stop it from running. Okay, so numeric data. Let's look at input, and we want to say enter a number, and we're going to call this variable X, and then we're going to call Y input enter another number. Okay, save, and we run this. What's your name? Bob. Favorite color? Red. And then enter a number. I'm going to say 4 for the first number and 5 for the second number. I forgot to print it out. So we're going to print out adding these two numbers together. What we want to do is we want to print out arithmetic addition. Okay, but we're starting out with string data. Okay, so if we do x plus y, we already know that the plus operator, when you're dealing with strings, just joins the two strings together instead of adding them arithmetically, because it doesn't make sense to add the letter F to the letter A arithmetically. It only makes sense to smash them together, to concatenate them as string data. Okay, so if we run this program again, Bob, red, enter a number, 4 and 5. Now you see, since it's string data, it does the same thing, and it just joins the string data together, because this is just the string character 4. It's not the number 4. Remember, the string character 4 is just a ASCII representation. Okay, so the string character 4, we look back at this table, and there's a numeric 4. And so the decimal value of what's being stored on the disk is actually 52, but it's not the number 52, right? The number that's actually being stored is 52, but the ASCII representation of that is 4. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to convert this ASCII representation of these numbers from string data, and we want to say, hey, we actually want numeric data. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to convert them to something else. So I'm going to say x. I know x already has something stored in it. So when you store something in the variable name is on the left. You have the equals operator, which is the assignment operator. You're assigning a value to this variable. And then on the right hand side you have the value that you want to be assigned to this variable. And it has to be in that order. Variable, assignment operator, value. Okay? So here, x already has a value, but I can store something different in x if I want. And I can say, instead of what's in x now, I want x to equal this new thing. Okay? And I'm going to use the int function. That converts something from a string to a number. Okay? So I'm going to convert the number 4 that we typed. So whatever was stored in x beforehand, I'm going to convert that into an integer, and then now the integer version is now going to be stored in x. Okay, so x was just the character 4, and so here we're reassigning a value to x, but x still has a value, and currently x is the character 4, so the string data 4 gets passed into the int function. So x is the argument of the int function, and that returns a value. That value now that's stored in x is now going to be numeric value, a numeric value, numeric data. All right. Oops. Undo. Now we do the same thing for y. Now when we print x plus y, now we're dealing with number data, numeric integer data, instead of string data. So we can actually add this mathematically. This add operator means something different depending on what data you're using. Okay, I can add numeric data to numeric data, and that's arithmetic addition. Okay, so it's not concatenation anymore. Alright, so if I run this program, what is your name? Luke. Blue. Enter a number, 4 and 5. And now we see that it's printed out 9. Last time, when it was string data, it just pushed the two strings together. Okay, so now you know how to get input from the user, and you can ask them for example, you can calculate the distance something went, and if they give you the speed and how much time it took, you could do an equation to solve how far the item went, right? So there's lots of different programs that you can write, but just knowing how to convert between the two basic data types we've discussed so far, string data, and you can convert string data into integer data. And you can go the other way by using str. So if I have a variable a and a variable b, I can say 5 and 6. So we'll say, first we'll just set a equal to 5, b equal to 6. This is integer data. I can print out a plus b, and then I can print out the string version of a plus the string version of b. blue. Enter a number, 4, 5, and then we see 5 and 6, numeric data, a plus b, that's 11, but when we converted it to strings, this is the string version of a, so it turns it back into an ASCII character. So then that is a 5 added to the string version of a 6, and that you push them together and it's 56. Okay, so these are some basic concepts in Python, the idea of variables, function calls, arguments, and expressions are all very, very important in Python. So that should be enough for this quick introductory video.